again, everyone here and everyone there. We are continuing with a more general discussion that we want to make typical for this Mengzi lecture series. And this is Schiller, whom I introduced earlier, now from City University, Hong Kong. We are here at SDNU, Jinan, and we want to discuss the future of psychology and the cognitive sciences in more general terms. Now, I started before to explain a little that we are becoming, something that everyone obviously witnesses. We are becoming more diverse. There are more players, more and more every day. There are more players on the scene, more countries who contribute to science in terms of publications, in terms of conference visits, and so forth. So the conferences become more colorful. This is one obvious sign of diversity. Also for editors, the affiliations become more diverse, and so forth. And if you visit international conferences, if you meet with more and more different people, you ask yourself, you see that they are interested in different issues. And the question is, how do we deal with that? Or what even if we don't deal with it, we are just experiencing it, but can we predict, can we expect, can we say something about where this might be going, where it should be going? Or where it should not be going. Perhaps there are dangers in this somehow. So let's start with a general question. How do you feel about this? What are your observations? How do you experience diversity in the broadest sense ever? I do not, let's say, only have this kind of vogue idea about it, that it should be, let's say, nationality or race or something like that. I mean it more generally, let's say, more and more differences on all sorts of dimensions that we may find interesting. What's your experience and how do you react to them?
Well, I think what you're saying is or what you observed is certainly right, that there are more and more layers on the field. So what I experienced, for example, is that there are more and more women that moved into cognitive sciences, which I think is a good thing. Still, it's the case that there is a citation bias. So what I try to, so that more work of male authors is being cited in general than of female authors. So what I'm always trying to do is to motivate my students to actually come with a declaration at the end where they count. There have been some publications about this, about citation bias in neuroscience, but also in cognitive science, if I'm not mistaken, to calculate. Okay, what's the proportion of papers that have been cited in their article that comes from women or from authors that are recognized as women versus authors that are recognized as male, to show that they are making an effort to also look especially at a more diverse playing field or playground. I certainly also witnessed that there are more and more authors from different countries. So from countries also where, so it moves, I think it becomes more diverse also in terms of countries, not only, so what you saw in the past was that it was predominantly Western countries like Europe and the US. What I like about more recent publications is that they have been written by authors who come, for example, from Asia, partly also from Africa, but less so, some of them, you know, wrote or did their research at their home institution, but also there are people who moved to let's say to the US or to Europe and did their research there, and then when they did the research there, they moved back to their home country and continued and built up a line of research there, and this is something that I've seen happening more and more often when I look at the field. So I certainly witness that there is more diversity. Yeah.
And is that
like more diversity, like for example, 20 or 30 years ago.
And does that have an impact on the topics, on the way we approach science, on the way we theorize, perhaps?
This is something. I mean, you know, theorizing and topics. In my experience, there's also sometimes sort of it's also a fashion sometimes what goes on and what is being studied.
Yeah.
So, for example, in linguistics, everybody talks about large language models at the moment. Few people actually know what large language models actually are, how they work. I think from a linguistic point of view, they are not very interesting, because what these models do is that they have a very large databases, and on this databases they are just by making inferences on the data, they are able to put out new output.
That's actually
but there's actually, I mean, linguistically, it's totally uninteresting.
Yeah, I think that by the way is also for another discussion perhaps.
This is what I see all the time, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just an example for a hype, okay, for a hype or a new fashion. Now, whether whether this is as a consequence of being more diverse, I doubt about. I have my doubts. I don't see that.
I personally think that this is actually the reincarnation of an old dream that we have seen in all phases of psychology. The dream that we don't need to think. If we only put enough data in one bag, then theory will magically come out of it. That has been done with emotion, where they have put about 25,000 emotion words into one bag, factor analyze, and then 3 or 5 or 15 or whatever factors pop up, and you think, so what? Okay, what does that tell us about the functions, about the mechanisms? But the dream is always there. I think if we do not think well, we leave it to the data, and they will tell us, and that seems more objective because we know that we do not always think straight. But I give you 2 examples where of a perhaps more constructive, more interesting way of impact. One example comes from, so Lorenza and I were also actually, we were living in the Netherlands, and then thinking about, these people are strange. I mean, you need some time to find out why that is strange. First you have this, there's a new country that's exciting and interesting, and you have this tourist impact. But then we thought, there are some situations where they really are very different from what I know. And then we tried to make sense of that, and then we basically, long story short, we came up to start investigating culture, and religion being one typical example of it, and realized that Dutch people are, let's say, culturally, not necessarily individually still, but culturally they are very, very, very Protestant, as the British people are. Perhaps not the Scottish, but let's say the English. And many Americans as well. And then we figured that this can predict in contrast to a Catholic. So we are talking about Christians. So we are not talking about Christians versus Muslims versus Buddhists. That also produces interesting effects and interesting changes in what we thought was basic cognitive processes. But then we developed this, or took these ideas about individualism versus collectivism, until I talked to my to an Indian colleague I work with, who is now working in Germany, and told her about but individualism versus collectivism, and she said, well, in India actually, we switch from one second to the other as it is useful. So they're not consider themselves to be individualist versus collectivist, but sometimes they're like this, and sometimes, and then that's an interesting concept. I never thought about this. And for this, you need other people from other cultures. Mm-hmm. Or another example, if you're talking about moral ethics these days, then everyone has extremely fixed ideas about what that could be, what it could entail. I learned a lot from Jonathan Haidt from the US, and he learned a lot himself because he first thought, no, the morals must be universal. In the whole, all people in the whole world must have a core idea about what don't kill other people and honor the elderly and things like that. There must be key issues. Until he was spending, I think, a year or so in, I forgot, Pakistan or something like this. And here he met people with very different ethical ideas, which he still got along with and sometimes even liked. Mm-hmm. And then he thought, how can it be that people I like can have so different ideas, eat different things that we would never eat, burn things that we would never burn, and vice versa, are appalled by some things we do naturally, but they find absolutely disgusting. Like some people, if you take their business card and put it in the back of your, and then you sit on it, then some people are really, really disgusted by that. I never thought about it. So in other words, only if you expose yourself to variability, then you can get insight into some things that you would not so easily get without it. So could you see that this might change the way we look into even our basic phenomena over some time?
I mean, it could. I'm not saying it could not, but this is something that I have. I mean, I have not consciously encountered so far in the area of cognitive science or cognitive neuroscience that I'm working on, to be honest.
But you showed us some example today. You said, well, then I go to Spain, and then I witness this, and then I think, wait, this cannot be right, what I think. So you make another experiment, or you learn about the dialect in Italy. If you would not have exposed yourself, if you would say, German is my language, I study German, that must be enough.
Yeah. No. Okay. And now I get what you mean. I think. I mean, but this is something that I think. I mean, what I did some time ago is that. I mean, when we look at science in general, it's very much Western-centered, right? Mm-hmm. Also, if we look at the output. Mm-hmm. So, for example, what I did a couple of years ago was a study where we looked at the output over the last 20 years in the four most top-ranked journals that are dedicated to the field of psycho and neurolinguistics. And we looked, okay, which languages are being studied? Now, no surprise, the English language is the most studied one, but it was surprising to us that about 50% of all studies in the area of psycho and neurolinguistics is actually about only one language, namely English. And then there are a couple of more languages like Dutch, German, French, Spanish. These are now 5.
Italian.
Maybe Italian. So two, in total there were 3 Germanic languages and 3 Romance languages, and those made up 80% of all the output that was being of languages that was being studied. And there are, I mean, who knows how many languages there are? I mean, nobody knows, of course, but what's the estimation at this point? There are 7,000 languages worldwide, and only 7 are being really studied, have really been studied, this is completely crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
So what we need to do is we need to diversify to see whether the findings that we have described for these 7 languages that have been studied so well so far are also holding for other languages. That's why I, for example, I'm trying to do as much as I can research on languages in Africa. I'm trying to do psycholinguistic fieldwork. So not only linguistic fieldwork is being done, right? But now I'm trying also to push the idea of, okay, let's go into the field, go to Africa, and do psycholinguistic research there. Partly to bring also the techniques and the knowledge to the people there, but partly also to get the data where they are basically generated.
If you just focus out a little bit more, let's say this is an example coming from language, and there it is particularly convincing, but I try to generalize and wonder whether one cannot derive from that the suggestion to be more courageous in pushing the boundaries of our own theorizing. So one pushing might be to say, okay, I think I know everything about English now. How about language X? But this should also be, let's say, shouldn't that also hold for attention, for memory, for I don't know what, that we should be more courageous. I mean, we do basically the opposite. We specialize. People, let's say, working on attention, there are about at least 16 different camps that are using different paradigms, because one is only using this task with this timing and this SOA, and says, but if you change that, then you're totally entering another ballpark. So we are basically doing the opposite of what we actually should do. Could one not just
maybe that's an idea. I mean, as you said, I mean the paradigm that I've been talking about today, the picture naming or picture with interference paradigm. The reason that I'm using this over and over again is that okay, I know how the paradigm works. Okay, so I know the basic effects. Yeah. I know what we could expect. But on the other hand, I mean, I could of course also spend the time to develop new paradigms and to maybe find, to investigate different aspects of language production. You're right, but my experience is that when you're using a new paradigm and you're trying to publish your work, reviewers don't like that. They don't accept this, and this is I think somewhat still the conservatism also that we have, and the skepticism that we have in accepting the work of our peers.
So you're basically talking about the reward schedules, behaviorists would say, in the publication field.
Yes.
So what would we need to change, perhaps, in the publication process to make it easier to, let's say, to transform diversity, which can be annoying and problematic, into something creative?
Yeah, I mean, this also, I think it also holds for diversity. I mean, it's probably not an accident that there are that publications of women are not only cited less, but that there are also less publications of women out there. So there may be an implicit, unconscious bias that reviewers have against women corresponding or leading authors.
I mean, I personally strongly doubt and have very strong there are many conscious biases. Of
Yeah,
people
or conscious biases.
Yeah. But I personally, I really struggle with, I typically do not want to know anything. I do not want to know what gender the author is in and what color the author is. I don't care. I want to see the quality of the research, but nowadays I'm forced to also expose myself. I'm always asked, well, what race are you? I don't know. What do you mean? And then they have prefabricated things where I'm Caucasian.
Yeah.
So I came from the tundra. I actually come from Africa, like all of us. And that's not on the list. So anyway, many strange things.
Yeah.
So you have to be more and more discriminative with respect to others and to yourself. So sometimes I wonder whether we should not go the opposite way.
Yeah. But your question was what has to change,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
So and that's an interesting question. And to be honest, I think probably many things have to change. And some changes have already been initiated, like for example that there are I think the whole system, the whole publication system should go to open access.
Well, how does that help?
Well, I mean, it may help in the sense that also the publishers do not have the power to nominate certain people as editors and as associate editors for certain journals. But of course, you need. I mean, there needs to be a quality assurance system, right? Now, the quality assurance system, if you look at the at least at some of the journals, is still very much dominated by at least by Western people, and mostly by Western male person. I mean, not always male, but at least Western people. Okay.
That's right. I can see that, but I, as an editor, as a chief editor of now 2 journals, I found this. I was highly motivated to change that, and found it extremely hard to be successful. I do flatter myself to have some success. So we were about 50-50 with respect to gender. We were slowly, very, very slowly improving with respect to national distribution.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because almost everyone whom I ask doesn't want to. And so I have so many more declines from women than from men. And at some point I need people at some point. And if no one wants to, then I have to take the ones that want to. And second, the same goes for geographic distribution. That may change over time. So because
it may change over time.
I don't know how many Brazilian researchers do I know, not many, and if I ask them all 3, let's say, and they all have their good reasons to decline, then perhaps in 10 years I would know 100, and then I would be more successful. So that one could hope, all this will be changing, but it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard, it takes time.
And it's also requires a bit more motivation on the other side.
Oh yeah.
That is my impression.
Yeah.
And
no, certainly.
This is not very rarely discussed in these days, where everything is, let's say, only coming from the top-down perspective. Oh, we have to. But anyway, okay. So if we think about so our experience, I explained that earlier. Was going to a very international conference. So I often went to very American-dominated conferences simply because they were the best.
But if people keep going to these conferences,
I understand.
I
understand. That's why we now also want to diversify, and also color-wise. I typically went to the Psychonomics, very important conference for cognitive people.
Yeah.
And I think I have seen about, at most, 3 black people among, let's say, 2,500 visitors. I also talk to my American colleagues, how can that come? They also always have a good story. So they are not stupid or immune or biased. They want to change that, but it's very hard because many people are, let's say, under pressure of their own community to say, you're doing this kind of laboratory research, why won't you help your people? It's a very common argument. But anyway, let's look at this more positively. So if one thing you easily see if you go to a very international conference where many different people from all sorts of continents are coming, the topics change. So do you think this just happens? They are just interested in different things, at least to some degree, or that this is a good thing, or this is even a very important thing?
Well, I think it's a good thing because after like a certain number of years, I think that it's good that also topics change in science. I mean, this has been, for example, now I have to go back to my own field again in linguistics. I mean, people have done generative linguistics, Chomskyan linguistics for, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years maybe. Now this has come to an end. People are not interested in it anymore, and I think there's a reason, because the results that have been produced in the last maybe 10 or 20 years, they have not been that spectacular anymore. So probably there is, I mean, maybe there is a lot that we do not understand still, but apparently we cannot get it out. So let's just move on and let's not try to stick at the same topic forever. But let's try something new. Yeah, and then we can with the knowledge that we have gained from generative linguistics, we can either come back and try to, with new methods, try to find out more about generative linguistics, or take our knowledge that we have gained from generative linguistics and do this in other types of linguistics. And this may also hold for fields in cognitive psychology in general. I think it's important to not forget about the past. So what I often see, for example, is that experiments that have already been done 50 years ago are being done anew, because people do not know them anymore, right? So they do the same stuff again, and then I think, well, this has been done a long time ago. But that we keep the memory of what has been achieved in the past, and this is of course also our responsibility to teach this to our students, but then also push and encourage people to do something new and think out of the box without forgetting the past, and try to integrate the past into new directions in science and cognitive science.
Well, the out-of-the-box thinking is something I think is worldwide dramatically underrepresented in the whole teaching system. But that brings me to the more organizational issues. You are the head of the department. You are responsible for many decisions. How should the department work? What kind of stuff should be in it? Which direction? And so forth and so on. So you're busy with organizational, structural preconditions for research. But you're also embedded in a disciplinary system. So the universities are, let's say, organized by disciplines. So that either you're here or you're here. And the same goes for academy. So I'm a member of the German Academy of Sciences, and people find it extremely important. Oh, is that someone for us? Or should he rather not be in this other, where I think good researcher is good researcher. I don't care how they call their own work or where they classify it. But the general question, if we think about all these changes, more diversity in terms of people, of backgrounds, of topics perhaps, and so forth, do we still have the good organizational frames to deal with that?
Probably not. I mean, the reason is simply that research in general not only in my area, also in your area, and probably also in the sciences, has become more interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
So the traditional boundaries of scientific disciplines, as they were maybe 40 or 50 years ago, they are vanishing more and more, and and this is also important because people, disciplines gain something by looking at other disciplines, right? And so it's more important to more and more important still to become more and more interdisciplinary and look over your own plate or the boundaries of your own plate and try to get something from other disciplines. And I don't think that disciplinary thinking has a future, and I don't think that it will, that universities will benefit from that. So what for example, just examples. So I'm interested in also in neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience. Now I'm at the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. There is a department of neuroscience which is at my university, which is in a different college, in a different faculty, so to speak. But we are trying to set up meetings now and seminars to try and work together. It's extremely difficult. It was extremely difficult when I first came to Leiden to set up an institute that had psychology in there, linguistics and biology. It was extremely difficult. All were interested in, as you know, because you were a core member, a core founder of that institute, all were interested in cognitive research, but they are basically, not speaking the same language. So I think we have to realize that, and also have to realize that we first have to, educate ourselves, come together, organize joint seminars, joint activities, so that we get to know each other and that we get to know each other's research in order to be able to understand what the other party is really doing and what they mean when they say. Because we are often, by saying the same word, that we're using the same technical term, we mean completely different things. And this is a long way. That takes a long time. I noticed that already in the Leiden Institute for Brain and Cognition. I realize this now again.
Universities are killing curiosity rather than fostering. Anyway.
Well, this is you could, if you were cynical, you could say it like this. I think there are still possibilities to foster curiosity, but it's not easy. It's much more. Let's put it that way. It's much more easy to lean back and do what you've been doing for the last 30 or 20 or 30 years, because you will be able to. You will be able to publish. You will be able, but are you really making an impact? I doubt that you will be doing this.
But the reality is that this is not only about us, but it's also about you, because you will having, most of you, we hope, perhaps all of you, have much more of the future than we will have, because at some point we're just retired or dead, or both. Which is a very unfortunate combination if I think about it. But anyway, so do you have questions or suggestions, or is there something we didn't cover that you find particularly interesting, or how do you feel about the future, especially the future in China, perhaps that has a particular aspect that we did not fully consider or overlook, or yes?
Thank you very much for giving us this talk. What I'm interested in is the last topic, the multidiscipline.
Yes.
Although there's boundaries between different disciplines in the university, so what do you think our psychology we need to also we have difficult to
Yes.
um,
To communicate, to
understand.
But we
Yes.
can
Yeah.
choose to them
Yeah.
actively.
Yeah, let me just briefly summarize because we did not work with microphones, so let me perhaps summarize that more auditorily accessible. So we are talking about interdisciplinarity. How do you do that basically in a university, which is, as we know, is structured according to disciplines. And the power lines are kind of manifesting that, as we have also discovered in Leiden. It's not likely to change very quickly, but how do you do that in a situation where the disciplines also need time to learn to talk to each other because they speak very different languages? Sometimes my feeling, and I've been in many interdisciplinary projects of the European Union with roboticists and technical people and so forth, sometimes the problem is not the different languages. Sometimes is that they think they speak the same because they are using the same concepts. And then after 1 year, you find out that this is not the case, that they mean something entirely different with the same word. That's even more problematic. But yeah, perhaps we can talk a little how we, again, I think none of us has a solution, but perhaps we can explain a little bit more about what we did in Leiden, because I think this was one of the more interesting ways to deal with this problem, right?
Yeah, I agree. We could briefly sketch. So there was in Leiden the university. Please correct me if I'm okay and fill me in, Bernhard. But so the university thought, okay, there were a couple of people who thought, well, they are not the university. So there were a couple of people, including Bernhard, who thought, okay, there's a lot going on cognitive science, and there are people who are interested in that in social sciences, in psychology, in linguistics, or in humanities, but also in the more science-oriented disciplines like biology, for example. So there were people who were interested in the behavior of birdsong behavior, and that could be related to language, and then there could also be things that could be related from linguistics to psychology, and so they thought, okay, why not trying to build up a center that is dedicated to brain and cognition. It's all happening. It's all about cognition. It's all happening in the brain, and that happened. That happened. So there was some seed money and some and then the medical hospital was also involved because they had a medical, an MRI scanner, and then another scanner was being purchased that was research dedicated. So that was already a big step. So I think in the end the institute, the Leiden Institute for Brain and Cognition, actually forced more research in the area and attracted also more people. But there were also boundaries. So there were also people who tried to interfere and who did not see the advantages and wanted to, try to, prevent that more money, more funds would go into that area, because, you can only spend money once, right? So if the money goes into the new area, it will not go into other areas.
And then the problem,
then you start making enemies. In some sense.
And
there's competition, right?
Yeah, and some people just the problem was that you have an old-fashioned organizational structure, like faculty for psychology, biology, and so forth, or science, and so forth and so on. And again, money is one thing, but it's also power, because then for instance, we made our own teaching because we thought that we need more interdisciplinary courses. No disciplines wanted to offer interdisciplinary courses, so we made it ourselves based on volunteer work. And we were able to do that. But then the question was, okay, can we give credit points to people that other faculties would accept? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Then the deans became very nervous because there would be things going on that would no longer be under their control, because we would need to invent our own teaching rules, credit rules, how to deal with things, and so forth. So as long as universities are structured in a disciplinary way and there is no extra official faculty for interdisciplinary research, then you may be able to deal with that. But that, of course, is hard to implement because everyone else would hate it, because it would take away something of their most interesting people.
Yeah.
So the reality of that, I think it is feasible. One can do things, and I think it was successful. And interesting also for people. So the students liked it, the researchers liked it. But the structure is systematically incompatible with universities as they are now. And it's very hard to see how that could be changed. That is a little bit of a depressing note, let's say, but one has to realize these things. So I think young universities that are freshly starting up have the best chances to reconsider and say, shouldn't we work differently? Shouldn't we do this in different ways? And there were, for instance, in the 1970s, there were many ideas in Europe about schooling, about interdisciplinary in some sense, namely that they said, why is it good for people to have 2 hours mathematics, 1 hour sports, 1 lesson on English, and then the next day something about whatever. So the schedule in schools, does that make any sense? Wouldn't it not make more sense to have an integrated approach? And so, for instance, what one Danish school was suggesting, they were, every year, they would, all the pupils would go on a bus and travel to another country, like France. And they would prepare the whole year for going there. They would learn French. They would learn everything about French economics, which obviously also teaches them about English and Chinese and whatever economics. So the trick is there are invariants everywhere. So if you learn about this, you also secretly learn about that. And then of course they in their preparation they learn so many more things that they can easily transfer the next travel, which goes to Croatia, I don't know. And so, but they were not having courses. They were just learning things all day, basically, and had this idea of a very natural, goal-driven approach to knowledge acquisition, which I think has been basically destroyed by all the schools that I have seen, by segmenting all the knowledge in the world into tiny little pieces until you have find it very hard to see how interesting it could be if you would really ask the question yourself. But the question is always asked from outside. You're being told by others what is interesting. You're never being asked what you think is interesting, and you're never given any challenges in life that make you interested in particular things. So that I guess is the problem. It's about schools, but the same problems you meet if we are talking about universities.
Oh yeah, certainly. And I think what you said about, it's always the case that once an institution has become fossilized, more or less, right? It's also more difficult to destroy structures again, right? To open up, because they've become too immobile to do this, and they like to I mean, they like to,
They
you know,
learn how to survive,
exactly.
like a person.
And they like to. I mean, so that you have a structure, and they like to stick to that. So if you say, well, we get away with all the structure, and we build up new structures, there's always a danger because it means a change, right? Now, people cannot deal very well with changes. We know that, and it's something that universities are reluctant to do. Whereas new universities have more freedom, so they have to build up the structures, and they could come up with completely different structures, and then I think they have an advantage. Yeah. So and this is also something that I see, for example, at my university in Hong Kong now, where there is a lot of restructuring. I mean, they are 30 years old now, so there's a lot of restructuring still going on. So, for example, they take one department from this college, and then they take one department from that college, and then they make a new college or a new school. And then they have now established a department, a school of computing. Fantastic, and there's data sciences in there, and computer science, and so but they have all been, and now so there are these opportunities, but it also takes a lot of it takes a lot of effort and takes a lot of courage to do that.
But it would be perhaps a good thing even for national interests, because it would help you to be better, and to develop better things, and so forth. So again, many questions. We could not solve all of them today, probably, but at least we may have discussed some, and perhaps you take a few of these ideas home, and then we will continue this series. We probably at the end of the month. We wanted also already to have some Indian colleagues here who are friends of at least one of them is friends of Yield, but unfortunately the visa issues were in the way, but we will solve that, and we will continue the discussion. In the meantime, we thank you for coming here and sharing your ideas.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks to you for